Never in my life have I ever seen or heard anybody talk about fatherhood as Dez Bryant did on the pivot. Now, what exactly did he say? Don't worry, stick around and we're going to talk about it right now. All right, let's get straight into it.
Let me read something. It's been on my phone for about since I met y'all. It's probably like 6 years. Just say, break generational curses. Quit yelling at your kids before they go to bed and expect them to sleep well. Quit yelling at your kids in the morning right after they wake up before school and expect them to have a good day. You set the tone for your children. You set the tone. Your, you set the tone for your voice. They will always remember in their heads. You become the inner voice. Don't be the inner critic. Speak life, speak love, speak bravery, kindness, and hope. Speak wisdom and truth. Most of all, listen to your children.
Wow. Profound. Shout out to Dez Bryant, man. That in itself, so short of a context of what he's saying. Like he said so much in very little words, is what I was trying to say. From the point of a black man being a father, because let's talk about that first and foremost, because black fatherhood isn't talked about a lot. Many times, single motherhood is more celebrated than single fatherhood. Fathers don't get the credit that fathers should. That's just point blank. Period. Now, there is a historical context to what the role of a black man is in the family and how slavery really distorted that thinking for us as black folks and the role of a man in the family, which I do have to give context to that before I continue having the conversation. But Des Bryant really brought up some key points. What you say to your children is super, super important, especially as a man in the family. You know, you have to pour into children, because at some point in time, children are going to become adults and they're going to become, especially young men are going to be fathers themselves, right? So what he said was, a lot that had to do with the communication part. How do you communicate with your child? How do you communicate with your sons as a man? How do you communicate with your daughters as a man? Sometimes we may come off as like aggressive or passive aggressive, overprotected. These are all terms that we hear when it comes to fatherhood. But the way he explained, not yelling at your kids before they go to sleep. And he was also breaking down how you should not be that inconfident person for them, meaning, speaking that inner confidence, if that is a context of word, inner confidence, the inconfidence that your child may have or low self-esteem. You don't have to be that voice for them because they're going through so much. You want to be a voice of a person of uplift. You want to give them all that they need, and you really want to give to your children more than you take away. Many times as men, we don't really get a lot of times that pouring into us, so it's very hard to really emulate, like, what does that look like for fathers to pour back into their children, because that wasn't a role model for them. You know what I mean? So with Des Bryant, I appreciate him just really breaking this down, because that's key, as fathers, as men, as leaders in the household, as people that, is kind of like the ghost in the family sometimes. I'm gonna use that word, like, black men are usually the ghost in the family. Sometimes that's by choice, sometimes that's by design, sometimes that's based on just generational curses. As you were saying, like, you have to break those generational curses. Breaking a generational curse is similar to trying to build a dam that's having an overflow of water. You know what I mean? It's very hard for you to try to break a generational curse, because you're not only breaking your own core beliefs and the things that you believe and dismantling all that, you're also trying to challenge, dismantle people that came before you that weren't really healed. You're trying to reconcile how your father treated you, or if you even had the privilege to know your father. I always ironically say, and this is the very, very sad thing about being a black man, is for me to say I knew and I grew up with my father in the home as a black man. A lot of black men cannot say that, which is very, very sad. I had a friend that he was like, when I told him in college I was going back home to see my family, he thought I was just gonna go see my mom. I was like, no, I'm about to go see my mom and my dad. He's like, you're the first black person or black man, I should say, that actually knows their dad and saying they're going back home to see their pops. Like everybody else I know doesn't know their pops. And I thought that was ironic. I was like, dang, that's really crazy. That is really, really crazy. But Dez Bryant is hitting a lot of points just in that short amount of time. But let's keep watching the video, see what else he's bringing to the table.
I never had none of that.
And he said it right there. He never had any of that. So how can you know? Let's see if he's going to break that down just a bit.
I get that to mine. And that's my number one priority. I follow that. That's how I break it. And so when I do it, I live it. I live it.
Not just doing it, it's not just talking about it, it's actually doing it. Shout out to Dez Bryant, man. Like, you as a father, as a person that is a figure in the household, being present for your children, it's tough, it's very, very tough. But especially again, like the blind leading the blind. Like you didn't have that for you, so you don't really know what that looks like. Or even if you did have that for you, it may not been the best example to follow either. You know what I mean? So Des Bryant is really breaking generational curses out here by having these type of conversations with his children. And it's not like he wrote this down. So this was like a promise he had to himself. This wasn't something he just came out of like left field and it's like, oh well, I'm gonna just start doing this. Like this, when you write something down, and this, like I said, it's 5, 6 years later, that's like a promise, that's like a commitment you make to yourself, and for him to still refer to that is awesome.
That narrative shit.
Mm.
That's what they never wanted to pick
Give me
up.
a second, bro.
Mm. Hey, that's a moment right there, man. We don't see men embracing each other in this way, especially when it comes to an emotional response to, as he's kind of tearing up, he had an emotional response to what he was saying, because that's real talk. So shout out to, bringing that, embracing it. Yeah. Love to see it. Most definitely love to see it, man. Hey, shout out to Dez Bryant. Shout out to, the pivot for actually bringing us up. There's a lot of different things to break down from this one. As a father, as a man, we have to do better within our families. We have to be better examples. We have to be able to communicate, and pour into children, or our children. We have to do better within that system, because that can be a very pivotal point. Well, shout out to the pivot. I know it's like a little, I guess I'm kind of corny with my jokes, but this could be a very pivotal moment in a child's life. Like a lot of folks that I work with, when we get to the assessment part and like, hey, what's the relationship with your pops or what's the relationship with your dad, a lot of times it's non-existent. And then you have folks that may have daddy issues, or you might have folks that don't really know what a healthy relationship looks like, or you may have somebody that, you know, has resentment towards their dad, because that relationship isn't there. Now it's not always like going to be this glamorous thing where like, you may have been done wrong. So now you have to, you know, go back in the past and like, draw from, your father or your non-existent father and try to pick up the pieces. It's not always a glamorous thing. But the ironic thing about healing and trying to work through things is like you have to really first understand like what type of relationship did you want or do you currently want with your father. you know Many times we don't have those honest conversations with ourselves, and sometimes we have these expectations of our dad when they can't really meet those expectations, or never have or never will, right? So that's what it looks like sometimes when you didn't have your father, and you have to really reconcile what does it look like for you to move forward. Is what were your expectations, and what wasn't met, and what is that inner child still saying? What is that inner child still yearning for? But again, shout out to Des Bryant. I appreciate you for really, really giving us a great, great example of what fatherhood should look like, what it looks like for men to pour back into the children. My name is Terrence Stewart. I appreciate y'all for tapping in. Y'all take care. Peace.